Welcome everybody to our presentation on OpenUI5, the new responsive web UI library. I'm happy to see so many people here despite the fact that, well, at least to me, it still feels pretty early. And then we're also not quite doing Java. Yeah, happy to see you all here.
Yeah, also a warm welcome from me. So this is my colleague Christiane.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is my colleague Christiane, who has been working on UI5 since about 2 years. But she's been doing web development for an eternity, like since the year 2000 when Netscape 4.7 and Internet Explorer 5 were still around. So a lot of web development experience here.
Yeah, thanks for making me look that old. Okay, and this is my colleague Andreas Kunz here, who is the architect for UI5 mobile team at SAP. And he's been with UI5 team from the very start, so like 4 years ago, I think now. But he's always been an open source fan, and he has also contributed to several other open source projects before that. So, for instance, Mozilla before Firefox was born, and some others. What on earth are you doing?
I'm just checking the football results from yesterday. So
really?
The Brazil game, so they won against Croatia.
Do you think this is a good point?
Yeah, sure then.
Okay, maybe then be at least as polite and show the other people too what you're seeing. So, right, so
that's the game Brazil against Croatia. We see the people here who are in the teams.
Okay, but that's maybe a bit odd to view this on a desktop, so maybe
well, it's only a phone, sorry.
Yeah, so maybe I can do something better for the guys in the back rows there. Right, so I'm going to move this a little. So
what's that?
Can you read that from the back rows? Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's actually that's the same app that you're currently looking at, just on a desktop.
It looks a bit different, though.
Yeah, it does. I mean, but we're actually looking at the same matches here. Only that the match day list that you can see on the right here is the one that you had for navigation before.
All right. So if you go back here, then that's the same thing.
Yeah, that's just the same thing. It's just because I have more space on my screen here, it is always displayed.
I see.
And I've got some more detailed information, probably about the players, which are in the respective teams here.
That's true. Yeah, you see more columns and.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah, but maybe wouldn't it be a good idea to go back to our original topic now?
Right, to OpenUI5, sorry.
Right, so let me just briefly close this again. And
okay, so to something completely different, to OpenUI5. So we're talking about this JavaScript library, this library to build web UIs. And there's a lot of JavaScript libraries already there in the world. So what makes our library special or different than the others? There are a couple of points. I think it's a very, very comprehensive library. We have a huge number of UI controls. It's about 180 different UI controls that are built in. But you can also build your own UI controls, of course. Then there's a lot of framework capabilities, support for model view controller concept to structure your application. There's data binding, HTML templating, routing. So lots of functionality that help you create big applications. Then because we are, the whole thing is created by SAP, there's also what marketing people would call enterprise-grade features. So it needs to be very robust and support a host of features that we will explain later. And one very special thing is that it runs in most current browsers, desktop browsers, as well as on mobile devices. So you can run it, as we have seen, on your iPhone, iPad. Doesn't matter whether it's mouse interaction or touch interaction. You have seen that the sizes of things adapt, that the structure adapts. So this is all responsive behavior built into the framework. And it's really one library that is meant to create applications for all devices, just one application that runs everywhere. And finally, the whole thing is open source. So it's under the Apache 2.0 license. You can use it for anything you want. You can even use it for commercial projects if you want to. And inside the library, we have also used a lot of open source libraries. So jQuery, for example, is a sort of foundation for UI5. Use parts of jQuery UI, jQuery mobile, datajs for the OData exchange, Handlebars for HTML templating, less CSS for the styling. So we are using a lot of open source, and sort of giving back to the community now.
Right, but I think that's enough theory for the beginning. So if you're like me, the first thing that you want to do when you come across a new framework and you decided to give it a try, you want to see how to get something on screen quickly. So like the Hello World examples that you know from every other programming language and from every other system in the world. And I just thought I'd save you some time and do the Hello World example here in front of you now. So I'm just gonna, I'm sorry, I need a different window here. So I guess I'll have to zoom in a little and maybe move the splitter a little. So, okay, what you can see here now is actually, well, a first tiny UI5 application within something that we call snippets. I mean, maybe some of you are familiar with JSBin. This is something similar. So what you basically have here is this is just an application where you can type your code in on the left side and then have a preview on the right side, which is actually just meant for demoing things, or for instance, if you want to show some code to someone else, you can also save these snippets, so to speak, and then email the links to someone else. So we're heavily using this, for instance, if we're tracking down bugs and trying to isolate them from larger applications. And what you can see here on the left is actually the start of the application is right here, which is the bootstrap that I'm loading, which has parameters. For instance, here's the source path where my UI5 sources are deployed. And then I'm doing some theming, and I'm loading some libraries with the controls that I want to use. And the application itself starts right below. So what's happening here is I'm instantiating a control of the type UX3 shell, which is basically the frame that you see around here, so the black header, and then you have this left and right side pane. And that's actually quite a powerful control, but at present it does not really have that much content. I'm sorry, that much content. There could be things like a menu up here and all kinds of other buttons on the left and right sides. But currently, as I said, it's not having that much content. It's just this instance of our commons button control that I'm using here, which just goes right here into this content aggregation. And this one has a text attribute, and the text is reflected here on the button. And then finally, now I've instantiated my whole content, I'm just placing it at some element on the screen, which is apparently a div below here. So this is all that it takes to get started with UI5 with a really, tiny application for the beginning. Now, this button does not do anything at the moment, so if I click here, nothing really happens. And if I want to change that, that's also pretty easy. And to start with, I'm just going to add an alert here. And I can simply go in here and type press, using the press event. Oh, sorry. And then just attaching a function here, which is not going to do much more than just say hi to you. So that's pretty much all. And if I hit run again here now, and I press the button, then you can see that it's already triggering this alert. So we have basically most of the events that you will usually need at any of the controls already in place, and you can easily attach your own functions to that. But this is of course not how you would go about writing a whole application, putting all the code into one page. As I said, this is just for demo reasons. And what you would expect of a proper framework is, of course, some support structuring your application code better, which is why we have kind of a MVC implementation there. And of course, it's not just some kind of MVC implementation, but it's one of the kinds that really help you structuring your code well. And what that means? Well, to me, if you do MVC right, I want to have views that should be really easy to write and also easy to read for someone who has not been present at the original implementation phase. So someone getting to see a view can determine at a glance what this view is about, which controls, which elements may be in there, and where it's going to be used, and also how it could be extended if I want to use it for something else. And then what is also important to me is that you have different kinds of view types. So depending on which kind of development you've come from, you may be preferring one over the other. So we have like JavaScript views where you can write all your code in JavaScript if you're more into this language. We have JSON views, and what we also have is, if you like the declarative approach better, you can also write your views in XML or even in HTML. Most of the applications currently developed within SAP have decided to go for the XML views, though. So the next example I'm going to show you in a minute is also making use of that. Now, certainly, to complete the MVC, we need a proper controller between the view and the model, where you can put all your logic, and which is also written in JavaScript. And then we also have different kinds of models there to make sure that you can connect to basically any service that could deliver data to you. So we have XML models that you can use. We have JSON models again. And what we also do have is we have an OData model. For those of you who may not be familiar with OData, it's an open data protocol which is developed by Microsoft. And it's based on AtomPub and JSON, and basically allows you to put RESTful services on top of any backend, delivering data to you, exposing it to your web application. And this is actually quite powerful because it also allows you to do a lot of things like filtering and sorting and even annotating the data that you're getting. Right, but let's get to the next example where I can show you the, sorry, I'm looking for the window again, where I can show you how MVC in UI5 looks like. Got to make this a little smaller again. So what is happening here is you have the bootstrap that I've already been talking about, and of course here again everything is just in one file, which would of course not be the case if you really were developing the application in your own IDE. Actually here's the XML view starting, and this would for instance be then in an XML file. So what's happening here is this tag is starting the XML view. Then I have the controller name that I'm giving here. And you can see that what is happening here below is nested inside are all the elements and controls that I'm using in this page. This is actually just a container control, which is called page. It has a title here that you can see here on the right, and some other header content like a flag. You could actually put anything in here. And then below you can see that the table that we're seeing here is then starting, which is obviously bound to something. You can see that I've defined the columns here. The columns have the labels are reflected up above here. And then below there are the items which are supposed to be displayed in the table. And this is actually just acting as a template for the separate columns and for the data which is being retrieved from the model. So what you can see here again is these are just text controls, which are again bound against some attributes that I have in my model. And if I scroll down a bit here, then you can see what model I'm talking about. So this is actually an excerpt from the model of the World Cup app that you've seen in the beginning already. Just the 3 players here that you can see here. And it's just a JSON model that I'm currently using here. And some lines below again, I am making use of one of the lifecycle methods of my controller to simply instantiate a JSON model from this object above and then attach it to the view. And this is all that it takes to have the data dynamically displayed in here. And then there's again some code which is just instantiating everything and is just putting it, as we've already seen, in this content div down here. And yeah, as I said, usually the controller would go into one JS file. In that case, the view would go into one XML file, and the model would certainly be retrieved from some service or other. So, and what you can also see here is what you have partly already seen with our World Cup app, these responsive aspects of the controls that we're using here. So if I grab this splitter here and drag it over to the left a little so I have more space, which I can allocate to the controls here, then you can see that the birth date column is actually really acting as a 4th column now. Whereas if I make this smaller again, then you can see that the birth date, the information is still there, but it is sort of popping in under the number control, the number column here. This is something that you can really easily configure with most of our controls. They have attributes in place with which you can gain control over, depending on how much space you have on the screen, how these controls will react. I could have also just let this information disappear once the screen is getting too small. Which brings me to my next slide. And here again, what you can see is our World Cup app. And here we're making use of the master detail pattern. I hope you can see it in the back rows, because I don't know if the contrast is high enough. So you have this match list, as you've already seen on the left, which is a master. And this is bound against the same data as the details view over here. So if I select something on this list, it'll be reflected here. And this is taken from iPad. So as you can see, it is in landscape mode presently. And this is why there's enough screen to have this master list always displayed. If I turned this into portrait mode now, this list would disappear at first. And you could bring it back by either swiping it in and then out again. And it would then overlay the detail content until you select something, or maybe just swipe it out again. And on the phone, the behavior is indeed a bit different, because there you have a true forward-backward navigation. So there's really 2 pages for the master and the detail layout. And this is something that you get for free when you're using some of our controls. For example, this is a split container that we're using here. So as I said, there is a lot of our 180 controls that you could use, which have these, this behavior, the ability to adapt to different screen sizes just built in. Right. And now, if you really want to find out what these controls are that I'm talking about and how you can use them and what attributes are there, then we have, of course, a lot of online resources, which you can use to find out about us. And I'm again looking for my screen, I'm sorry. I think the most interesting one is actually our controls playground. So you have a list of controls on the left side. And if you pick one, I'll pick the button for now if I find it, because we've seen that before. Simple controls button. Then you have things like all the settings that you could use here, and the events and the methods. But what's most interesting is the examples here below, because this is all available online. And if you want to find out how to instantiate one of our controls and how to use it, you can simply have a look at those. And I can click on Show Source here. And then you can see that this is, well, pretty similar to the code that you've seen in my Hello World example already. And what's really cool about this is that you can actually also start manipulating the code in here. So there's no need to type anything on your own, just if you want to try that out. And I can just change this button here. For instance, change the text to Hello World again. And maybe add some attribute that I happen to know because I've used the button a billion times. And once I hit apply here, you see that the behavior of the button, the display has been changed, and it's also reflecting my change to the text. And you can do this with any of the controls that you find in the list here. And what else is there on the page? Well, for instance, you also have some demo apps. So if you want to find out how to structure your apps best, and then you can just have a look at those. For example, we have the purchase orders demo app here, which is again making use of this master detail pattern that we're seeing a lot. And you can download these and just have a look at the code. And besides that, there is also, of course, the complete API. So here you can really see all the classes, all the complete inheritance, all the methods that you have. So whatever you need. And we also have a developer guide where you can find all the tutorials that you may need, and things like best practice guides, how to go about write your own UI5 application. However, it might be that there's requirements that you do have that we have not been able to foresee. And if you really cannot find a control that suits your needs, then there's, of course, also something that you can do about it, which will be shown to you by Andreas now.
Right. So if among the 180 controls that we offer, there's nothing in for you, then you can easily build your custom controls. It's just a matter of a couple lines of JavaScript. We'll have a look at a very simple example, which is a square control. It's just drawing a square with a text inside, just to make it very easy to understand. So a new control is defined by extending an existing control. In this case, it's just a control base class, but you could extend a button or something else, giving a name like my.square in this example. and then here you go. So UI5 controls consist of 3 different parts. One is the API. So in this case, it has 2 properties. The metadata section on top defines this. That's the text property of type string. That's the size property, which gives the size of the square of type CSS size. And declaring the size here makes sure that UI5 can do type validation, so you can be sure that it's a proper CSS size, whatever the user sets. And for this metadata, there will be getters and setters generated, and the data binding will also be automatically working for these properties. More complex controls could have events or aggregations of stuff, but let's keep it simple for now. The second part of a control is the renderer function. That's the method that creates the HTML, that creates the actual page and page structure of the control. So how is it represented in the page? This function writes basically into a kind of string buffer. So you see here first it writes an opening div tag, in the end it's a closing div tag. We write the width and height of this one control instance. And also the text of the control is written here. And UI5 will automatically call this method whenever the UI needs to be updated, when the data has changed or when it's reappearing after having been invisible. So this is basically how you create the UI. And the third thing in the control is what we call behavior, the active parts that reacts to user interaction. So when, in this case, a user clicks on the control, this method is called automatically. There's no need to register your own mouse or touch or something handler. We will automatically make sure that whatever device it is, this method will be called. In this case, we just bring up an alert again, which you see here. And basically, these like 20 lines of code is everything that is needed to create a new control. To use this control, you just do the same thing as for the button. You say new, in this case, my square. Give the properties for text and the size as hello and 100 pixels for the upper one, and the lower one is only 80 pixels, me too. So this control is fully usable than like any other UI5 control. Just to give you an impression of a bit more complex example, that's a Google Map control. Let's first have a look at the code. It's a wrapper basically around the Google Maps API. This control also extends from the base class control. Has as properties has latitude, longitude, and zoom, typical properties for a map. And you see again, there's a renderer function that creates a sort of div wrapper for the map. There's some event binding between the map API and the UI5 control, but that's it. So it's maybe 50 lines of code, and you have a fully working Google Map control inside UI5. In this case, the control properties are not set, but in this case, they are bound to a model. The model is defined above. And we have some other controls, some sliders that are also bound to the same model. I'll zoom out a bit now to make it more easily visible. So here you see some sliders that are bound to the same model. This means we have two-way data binding, of course. This means if you move the slider here, the map will react. Or if you move the map on top, you see the sliders also react. So this is full two-way data binding coming out of the box with just 50 lines of code. If all this JavaScript is a bit too much for you and a bit too far away from the HTML document, we also offer HTML templating. So this means you can just write your HTML however you want it. You can write your CSS to style it, but you can use our data binding and our two-way binding, our data models, to display data in your custom HTML. So in this case, as I said, it's powered by Handlebars.js, another open source library, but we bring in an additional functionality that our model is connected. These paths, these binding expressions here, they are pointing into our model. So if we go to an application, a small one that shows this, zoom in again. There's a small JSON model with some football player names. And down there, you see this HTML template, which binds the list to the players aggregation in the model. And you give the text for the first and last name. And the outcome is visible on the right-hand side. So you see just a very plain HTML list. Okay, after all this code, maybe let's step back a bit and get a broader overview of the context. We said we are working for SAP, and this has been developed by SAP. So I wonder how many of you are roughly aware what SAP is doing. Maybe raise your hand. That's okay. Almost half of you. Who is not aware at all what SAP does? Raise your hand. Okay, who is too tired to raise your hand? Raise your hand. Okay. Yeah, to those of you who don't know what SAP is doing, our marketing people would come and say, hey, 70%, that's 70% of all the transactions in the world are processed by SAP systems. The figure that I like better is 70% of all beer in the world is produced by SAP customers. But this is not to say that SAP is a great company, but it should make clear that a lot of companies in the world rely their mission-critical processes to SAP software. And this is why we take very special effort to make sure everything is running right and everything stays compatible across releases. Because if one of these customers' processes are broken, then we might not get our beer in the end. So we have some extra testing. For example, our automated tests, if they are fully run, this full run takes more than 24 hours. We have screenshot comparisons every night to make sure there are no visual regressions introduced by some changes or patches. We have 2 eyes principle with Garrett code reviews and many of these things to make sure that the quality is right. Then there's a lot of supportability features built in, because if one of these beer producers or any company has a problem, then we need to fix it easily. And I can show you something here. In all UI5 applications, you just press the magic key combination Control, Alt, Shift, and S like support. So all fingers you have and support. And then you get a pop-up like this one, which displays a lot of support information. So first of all, there's, of course, version information, build information, a lot of current settings on language, what libraries are loaded, what modules are loaded. So a lot of technical information first. Then there's a JavaScript trace. So once I interact with the map, for example, you see there are a lot of trace statements then in the output, which you can analyze the issues with. The thing I like most is the control tree feature. This displays all the controls that are in the UI in a sort of structure, how they are hierarchically arranged. So you see here, even the Google Map control, which we have just created on the fly, is already taking part in this game. You see when you select something here, it's highlighted in the page, so you can easily find the control you want to analyze, why it's not working. And you can inspect all the properties, like the latitude and longitude. So if I change this here, you will see the map move in the background. So this is all live. You can inspect really the application state you currently have. You can also see the binding infos, where the data is coming from. So you understand the data binding better, because data binding is always something under the hood, which is a bit harder to debug. And you can also set instance breakpoints for exactly this map instance on all the methods you have here. So you can also find out what's going wrong. There's more information for debugging, more for performance. So basically, there's a lot of stuff that helps you debugging your application. More features that we provide that make it enterprise grade is, of course, internationalization. So we have support for hundreds of locale via the CLDR. We have translation of our UI5 controls themselves to 37 languages. We have, of course, right-to-left support for Hebrew, Arabic, and such languages. Then another important thing is accessibility. So for blind people, we have screen reader support with the ARIA standard, and keyboard navigation, high contrast theme for those who can see so well. Another big topic is extensibility. So if customers or partner companies want to adapt the application, there are special features to support this kind of extensibility without modifying the original application. And last thing is theming. Customers often want to add their own branding to the application. So this is something which is also supported well in UI5.
Right. So I'm going to show you something about theming in UI5 now. So basically, we're making use of the less functionality to generate CSS files for themes, which actually makes it possible for us to define certain theme parameters at a central place in our theme, and then have them distributed to all the CSS classes that might be using them. So you can define things like your base colors, your font sizes, and what font you're using, and all these kinds of information once. And when you change something about it, it's not like you have to go through, I don't know how many hundred CSS classes your application may be using and change them all, but you could just change the parameter ones and then generate the CSS file again, and everything will adapt accordingly. And as Andreas has already mentioned, we come with some predefined themes. So the theme that you've previously seen for our World Cup app is called SAP Blue Crystal. There's also the one that we've seen in the Hello World example, which is called Goal Reflection. And we also have, I mean, High Contrast Black is actually also acting as a theme. And, but, I mean, basically you can do anything with our theming. So themes can differ a lot from each other, and there's very little constraints applied. And you can, of course, go ahead and write your own themes from scratch. But there's also a tool that is available online, which is called the Theme Designer, which you can use to base your own theme on one of those that we're already delivering. And I'm just going to show you that, how it works. Oh, I'm sorry, I keep getting confused about the windows here. This one is something I don't need anymore. And it should be somewhere here. So, the Theme Designer, exactly. So, as you can see, we have two themes deployed here, so I can choose from any of these and then start creating my own theme. I'm going to use the SAP Blue Crystal for now because, as I said, this is something that we've used in the World Cup application, and just hit open here. And, oh dear, maybe now I should reload the window because this is not really visible. I'm sorry. Oh, I need to zoom out a little, excuse me. So, okay, this is what it's roughly supposed to look like. Okay, so what I can do here is, now I've chosen my starting theme, and I could now start to do my theming based on a control level. So I could actually just use the theme as is and then restyle some of the controls that I want to use in my application. But what I find more interesting is I can also just restyle my whole application. So if you're writing applications for different customers, and they may want to have their own brand colors in there, and they want to exchange the logos or background images or whatever, then you can just use your application in here. I'm using the World Cup app now. Okay, don't need to give that name here because it's being generated anyway, and then after 1 or 2 seconds I should get a preview here. Right, so, okay, so what I have here is I can switch between emulating different devices here. I'm going to stick to the desktop mode now. And I can always switch between the original and the preview of my changes here. So if you just want to see how it's compared to the original theme that you've used, then you can always just use the buttons here above. So, okay, maybe I have a customer who prefers green over blue, and I have this quick mode here, and I can just go ahead and start changing the colors. So I'm going to just change those to some random greenish values now. Just for the demo, I'm going to change the link color too. And so these are just those that are most commonly used, actually. And what I now want to do also is I might want to have a different background, because this blue background behind this football doesn't really fit to my green brand colors anymore. So I need to make this smaller a little. And oh, wait a second, I need my background image, I'm sorry. So I have a background image here. Maybe put this to the side a little. So what I can do now is I just hit this button, and then I get a file uploader here, and I can start dragging my images from my desktop just in here. And as you can see in the background, it's already reflected here. This one is highlighted, so this is being used as a background image now. And I hit OK. Then, okay, maybe this is a bit too colorful for a background image. So what I can also do here is I can reduce the opacity a little to, well, some value that makes it disappear a little more into the background. And now all the changes that I've been doing here are also reflected in the application. I mean, okay, that's not that large because of the resolution here. So you can see that the background is actually staying the same over the pages that I can navigate to here. And also the highlighting color is reflected and has been changed to green. And of course, if these parameters that I can edit here are not enough for me, I can switch to expert mode, where you can see that you have a lot more parameters that you can also edit. And if that still is not enough and you still feel that there's something you want to change about the appearance here, then you can also just go to the CSS mode and then freely start typing CSS in here. And once you're done and you're fine with your template, then you can just export it and deploy it wherever your application is. And you can use it as a regular theme. Okay, I'm not going to show this now because this is just the demo. Now, of course, it is debatable whether I've just created a beautiful theme, but given that I've only had like 2 minutes time to change something here, I think it's, well, it's just to show how the theme designer basically works. And I have brought one slide just to make sure that you see that if you dedicate some more time creating your theme based on top of one of our themes, that there's also something beautiful that might come out of that. So the dark theme here, unfortunately, well, it's better visible on my screen, has a different background, has all the colors restyled, and well, actually, it's not a theme which is available yet, but it's just something that one of our designers did, trying the theme designer, and just to see how far you can get with that. Right. So.
Yeah, but to see some things that are real and available, I want to show you just some screenshots of actual applications, just so you get an impression of the applications that are currently built and running with UI5. So this example is SAP Business One. It's a quite typical SAP application using the Goat Reflection theme again from the Hello World app. Maybe you recognize the shell again. This is a more current application, travel and expense application. So this screen is exactly where I will enter my travel expenses for this conference and get hopefully the money back. So this is really used productively inside SAP and also available for customers. Then this is an app mostly written for the iPad, but looks quite different, as you can see. So you see what you can do with CSS changes. This one is pretty interesting. We're back at football now. This application is written for one of the German football teams for their training. So their players have sensors in the socks, and also there's a sensor in the ball. And the position of all the sensors and the speed is tracked several hundred times per second. And then this data is analyzed. So who had the ball, who passed to whom, or outside the field, who scored a goal. And then this is all in the system. And you can click on one of the tiles to see, oh, there was a goal. How was it going? And then you see a sort of video where the players are really running. You see everything, how the game evolved. And how, do you see the speed here? So how fast was the player at any time? And so that's an interesting way for trainers to analyze their players better. So for me as a football fan, it's a bit too technical. But for me as a technology fan, it's quite cool. And if you want to see at least a video of this, you can come to our booth later on. We don't have it in the presentation. This is also an interesting OpenUI5 application. So this is Pac-Man. Just to show you that it's that UI5 is not restricted to business applications. So in this case, also the Pac-Man and the ghosts are all controls defined like we've seen before. Got it. And so you see you cannot use it only for business applications, but for anything you can imagine. Okay, so how comes it that you may not even have heard of it when this is such a big and comprehensive and obviously major library? This may be because UI5 is only open source since about half a year, since December of last year. It was internally developed inside SAP as SAP UI5 first, as a closed source UI toolkit for our own applications, then also for partner applications. But we as developers were open source fans and pushed for it to be open source, and also the outside consultants said, okay, we are using this for our SAP projects, and it's pretty cool. We also want to use it for other projects. And so there was a push from our sides, and finally the company was convinced, okay, give it away as open source. You see people put this kind of images to the internet. They printed T-shirts. Please make it open source. So there was quite a campaign to open source UI5. And this happened as I said, in last December. So since then, UI5 is available under the Apache 2.0 license. And we have put up a web page, openui5.org, which I think is only linked here. So this is the general entry page for UI5. There you have the download links. You have the links to all the sample applications in the demo kit that we've seen before. You just go to openui5.org and you can get to all the stuff you've seen. There's also a GitHub page for OpenUI5. So if you find any issues, you can report them at GitHub. And while the sources are available for download from the openui5.org page, you can currently not yet fork the sources at GitHub because we are restructuring them to make them simpler. And we don't want you to waste time with sort of outdated sources. But it should be forkable and available at GitHub in some weeks, I would say.
Right, so, okay, so that's pretty much all from our side. So we think that we have created something that you really might want to use. So I think the key takeaways for you to what you should really keep in mind about OpenUI5 when you start thinking about writing your own applications which should run across several devices, and you don't want to stick to something like desktop, or you don't want to go for native technology on mobile phones, for instance, then OpenUI5 is really something which is worth trying, because we have all the responsiveness and all the controls that you need to really build proper applications which will allow a smooth user experience on any device. We have powerful data binding capabilities and MVC, which is also really easy to learn and really easy to work with. And and all the enterprise-grade stuff that you might also need if you're writing applications for customers. And so, since I can see that we have like 10 minutes left, we could also do a brief questions and answers session now. So if you have any questions, just, fire away. Is there a microphone for the audience somewhere? No? Okay, so then you maybe just have to speak up a little.
I've got one in mind.
Yeah.
You mentioned sort of as the enterprise nature of it.
Yeah.
Part of the applications that we produce have to have support for relatively old browsers, sadly IE8.
Okay.
So what sort of, you mentioned obviously IE and Firefox, and how far back the sort of the UI controls that you have going?
Right, so maybe if the others have not really heard the question was how far back our browser compatibility goes. So we basically support Internet Explorer 8 and upwards, because we have a lot of customers that are actually also using outdated browsers. The only thing about Internet Explorer 8 is there might be some controls actually using kind of you'll have visual degradation, so you'll probably not have things like rounded corners or any of these features where you would have to use tweaks to get them displayed in Internet Explorer 8 too. But for I think 95% of the controls, I can say that these are also compatible with Internet Explorer 8. And for the other browsers, well, we usually support the newest version, Firefox ESR also, Chrome, Safari, what have you. So yeah, should not be any problem with business customers.
So maybe one caveat, the responsive mobile controls may be only working properly in Internet Explorer 9 and up. So because Internet Explorer 8 has some very strict limitations about HTML5 support, like, so it depends. So most stuff supports Internet Explorer 8, but it's clearly documented somewhere where we only have Internet Explorer 9 support.
Any other questions? Yes?
How does it respond to different screen resolutions on the desktop?
Well, we have something that is... I'm sorry?
Repeat the question.
I should repeat the question, sure. So the question was how it responds to different screen resolutions on the desktop. So what we do have is we have something called device detection, and this device detection also takes care of looking at how large the screen is actually. So does that answer your question maybe? So you can actually react and respond to these changes in resolution size and can then adapt the controls, or they will actually adapt automatically most of the time.
So, yeah, there's CSS media queries, for example, used in some cases where it's just a visual change. When we have a behavior change, like the split container with a master detail, where it completely has a different behavior, then there's probably some JavaScript involved on our side. But the point is that the application developers don't have to care about the different screen sizes.
Do you have any facilities for testing?
The question was about facilities for testing. So I think with UI5 comes also the QUnit. That's the jQuery testing framework. This is what we also use for our unit tests. Apart from that, there's this new OPA tools. What's the long name of it? So something where you can test whole applications on JavaScript level. That's basically what we deliver. So what you can also use is other testing frameworks.
Yeah, and you can certainly also do something like we've did internally. For instance, we can, if you're using Firefox to debug something, then you can also, if you edit your proxy settings, you can actually, under the hood, replace the version of UI5 which is running on a customer server, or in our case on some other application server, with the newest one, so we can easily check if maybe someone reports a bug, if this has already been fixed in some of the previous patches. So, any other questions? Yeah?
So you said you supported models in JSON, XML, and open data.
Yeah.
Suppose I have to get my data using sort of like a custom JavaScript library. Can I also write that in?
So I didn't get the last part.
So suppose I have to use a custom JavaScript library to go and grab my data. So I'm not using open data or standard formats. Can I integrate that easily?
Yes, so you can create your own models. So if it's not coming in one of the formats that we expect, you can create your own models very easily. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, I mean, we're also using datajs for the connection to OData, so we're basically also making use of a different open source component to get there. And there is something called like a base class for models, which you can easily extend if you really need something else on top of that. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah?
So you said that there are other similar libraries out there. How does OpenUI compare to those in terms of responsive design?
I think in terms of responsive design, we might be pretty unique that we provide controls that are very responsive. I mean, Bootstrap is maybe something that comes close in this respect. But compared to other libraries like Bootstrap or Angular, I think we deliver the more complete package. So we integrate different open source libraries and make sure they play well together. So I think in terms of responsiveness, we might be the UI library that delivers most controls, complete controls that are responsive and that can be easily used without going down to CSS and HTML level.
Okay. More questions? We have like 3 minutes left.
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Your iconography, what do you have? Do you use anything specific for your icons? Are you sort of developing
For icons, the icons themselves are designed inside SAP on our own, but the technique we are displaying the icons is using the icon font, so they are zoomable, and if you have better resolution on the Retina displays, they are very crisp and sharp. And there's one icon font delivered with UI5, so you can use it, and it has hundreds of icons, I think, maybe even too many. But basically, the good thing about icon fonts is that you can apply all the CSS stuff, like the color and the text shadow will then be an icon shadow, and so that's pretty cool instead of using single images for the icons. Okay, I guess we are at the end. So if you have any more questions, you can, of course, come to our booth right in the middle of the hall.
You cannot miss us.
Your mic is off. Okay, then I will continue speaking. So you see, OpenUI5.org is our webpage. This is our GitHub page. can be easily found in Google as well. Don't have to write it down. The docs and demos are linked from the OpenUI5.org page, and at Twitter via OpenUI5. So thanks a lot for your attention.